Chapter 2 Exterminating the Intruders, First Part. The third OSB had stolen the form of one of the woodcutter's family members, headed straight for Ardaz, and, after transforming into one of the villagers toiling in the fields, returned to the village. Since it retained the knowledge and outward appearance of its victim, not even family members could see through its trickery. Perhaps Ardaz was not the OSB's destination or hiding place at all. The Glaciertes lived in a town not 50 kilometers away, where it was possible to board a ship and sail down the river Benev. Greylancer had decided to return because Mitya had told Bejrot of Greylancer's visit before the woodcutter's body had been stolen by the OSB. If the OSB could steal the identity of the greater noble, whose name was known across the frontier, they would be able to march into the capital uncontested. No doubt the enemy would risk life and limb to that end. As darkness descended, Greylancer left the chief's house. The eyes of those peering from the windows converged on the noble patrolling the streets. He emerged into the village square. Though the street lamps were dark, a near full moon lit the well in stone relief with a bluish glow. Several wagons were parked on the western edge. Greylancer looked up in the direction of the grating screech overhead. Silhouetted birds fluttered across the moon. Night migrants. The black nocturnal birds of passage alighted around Greylancer and began pecking at the shadows of the trees, houses, and wagons. The birds used their pointed beaks to eat the ground insects, gathered in the shadows at night. And because they appeared to be pecking at the shadows, they were also called shadow eaters. After gazing down for a moment at the birds picking the strand-like insects off the ground, Greylancer muttered, "Seems I lack what the shadow eaters are looking for." Nobles cast no shadows at their feet. The night is still young. I pray the OSB are an impulsive race. The loss of Grosbeck will be felt dearly. He grumbled to himself. Spoken by this man, however, the words had the ring of scathing damnation against the OSB. A fine moon. After looking up for a moment, the noble resumed his patrol. He made no sound when he walked. Even the shadow eaters did not notice his footfall. Of the paths leading out of the square, Greylancer headed for the west exit. As he passed by the wagons parked at the edge, the nearmost wagon instantly began to lose its shape. An amorphous mass the color of the wagon leapt at Greylancer. The flash of movement gave away its presence. Greylancer twisted his enormous body to the right at an unthinkable speed. Gripped in his right hand was the long lance he'd used to fell the ghost archer earlier in the day. The curved conical tip struck the mass and flung it against the stone wall along the path. The enemy was Protean, shifting form moment by moment. The instant the lance poised for another attack, the mass twisted into a vortex and flowed through a hole in the stone wall. The noble thrust the lance against the wall. The wall exploded and smashed to pieces. When he cleared the rubble in his path, he spotted the fleeing mass 50 meters ahead. Suddenly, the mass changed shape again, stealing the form of a nearby creature. A black cat scampered 50 meters in the moonlight toward a lit building with unbelievable agility. The OSB was capable of doubling the abilities of the creatures it became. Greylancer's lance discharged a particle beam. A purple streak tore through the darkness. The beam grazed the cat's tail and bore a 5-meter-long trench in the ground. The explosion made no sound, as if in deference to the tranquility the moon demanded. Watching the cat disappear inside the building, Greylancer broke into a run. When he reached the door, lively music filled his ears. He didn't need to look at the sign to know he had stumbled into the all-night tavern found in every frontier town. The tavern was crowded with patrons. The moment they glimpsed the stranger's entrance, the faces of the patrons and bartender cum proprietor froze. The room reeked of liquor and smoke. "Not one move," commanded Greylancer before anyone could speak. "Anyone else here?" he asked, glancing at one door in the back and another to the left. The back door was the entrance into the staff room, and the door on the left led into the washroom. Game maps for a vampire hunting game, and that was all the rage in the frontier, and coins and various chips and cards for wagering cluttered the tabletops. No one attempted to hide the game, perhaps petrified by the greater noble's ghostly aura. "Two," the bartender cum proprietor answered, his voice stiff, perhaps surpassing the usual tremulous reaction. "My wife is in the back, changing. And there is another in the toilet." "Look right," boomed Greylancer to the patrons of the tavern. "If the person next to you has never left your sight, stand over there against the right window. Otherwise, raise your right hand." Within seconds, everyone save the proprietor stood by the window, despite the knives and guns undoubtedly concealed among them. Not one thought to reach for their weapons, as they all stared at the same two doors Greylancer did. The enemy could not have escaped. It must have taken some damage by the earlier hit. Neither was the enemy so feeble as to flee in the face of a flesh-and-blood noble. Since the enemy might be among the patrons, Greylancer had no choice but to detain them. The back door opened first. A slender, middle-aged woman wearing a colorful corset and flared skirt emerged from the staff room and became immediately petrified by the tension in the room. "A noble," she stammered, and at the same time a youth in his mid-teens came out of the left door and was stopped cold. "Lord Greylancer," the proprietor began to jabber, "this is my wife, and the boy there is my son. Whoever you're looking for, I can assure you these two aren't involved." Whether the greater noble heard him or not, his steely voice rang across the tavern. "Strip off your clothes, both of you." It was an order no one dared defy. Even the husband and father of the two in question could not form the words to protest. Surely the two were desperate to know what they had done to attract such direct attention from a noble. Surely they knew nothing. Nevertheless, the woman unlaced her corset, and the teen unbuttoned his shirt as ordered. As the woman bared her ample breasts and taut body from the waist up beneath the gas lamp, the eyes of the patrons pleaded innocent to having any lascivious thoughts. "Move your hands," ordered Greylancer. The woman lowered the hands covering her breasts. "Turn around." Both mother and son turned once around. Finally, anger began to seep into the eyes and faces of the patrons. They were not castrated livestock after all. One Greylancer commanded, "Take off your bottoms." One of the men jumped up and shouted, "That's enough." He pointed a gun at Greylancer. The lance slashed the man's elbow like a bolt of lightning, sending the severed arm sailing toward the wall. So quick was Greylancer's attack that the man was unaware of his pain until his blood rained down on the others like rose petals. He glanced around the blood-spattered room, then fell. Strange occurrences happened all the time in the frontier, but not even Greylancer could have predicted what happened next. A gunshot rang out. The gun, still gripped in the man's severed hand, had crashed against the wall and exploded on impact. The bullet pierced the woman's right breast and shot clean through her back. A dreadful silence came over the room, and in the next instant, the woman crumpled to the floor. "Mama!" The boy shouted and ran to his mother. Everyone stared in terror. The woman's head twisted a full 360 degrees, tearing off at the neck and spraying like a savage animal at Greylancer. Deep inside the fanged mouth of the kindly country woman was the green glow of a cyclopean. Greylancer thrust the lance inside her mouth, skewering the woman's head as it flew at him, then crushing it to pieces. The room filled with screams. Pulverized bits of flesh and bone and eyes turned into gray shoes in midair and splattered on the poor onlookers' heads, faces, and hands. Like the rest of the mother's body, the gray matter stuck on the people's skin twitched and quivered and stopped until it vaporized in an instant. "I shall take my leave of you." Greylancer spun on his heel. Any interest in the tavern, its patrons, the OSB, the possessed woman, much less the village? Another gunshot. A tiny hole opened the cape shrouding his massive back, and disappeared as quickly as it appeared. The noble's garments were made of a memory fabric that restored its original shape when damaged. Turning, Greylancer confronted the youth clutching the gun in both hands. Purple smoke plumed from the trembling barrel. "You killed my mother." The boy sobbed, tears rolled down his cheeks with every gasp. The noble's reply was frigid. "The creature I struck down was not your mother. Don't you see that?" "Listen to him, Lingor," shouted his father from behind the bar counter. "He's right." He alone understood that the fate of his family turned on what would happen in the next few seconds. "Lord Greylancer is not responsible for what has happened here. Get a hold of yourself." Nobles, nobles, nobles. They're to blame for all of this. Mama would still be alive if you damn nobles. The boy's anger tensed his finger before he intended to squeeze the trigger. The moment the gun roared, Greylancer plunged the silver spearhead through the boy's throat. The boy's head tore off at the initial gouge and landed in the middle of where the patron stood. Screams again erupted from the crowd. Lance in hand, Greylancer resumed his walk toward the door. He sensed the hatred rise up and countless weapons being drawn behind him. "Have you any idea the position you are in?" The force of his voice was enough to freeze the animosity surging toward him. "If the OSB are not destroyed within 24 hours of a confirmed infiltration, the area within 1,000 kilometers of the invasion point will become the target of our Corona cannon. I have yet to report to the capital that the threat has been put down, and the woodcutter Majorot made first contact with the OSB yesterday at dawn. Try as you might, there will be no escape." Even after the echo of his voice and its mastered dissolved into the darkness, the villagers could not move for a good long while. Several minutes passed until freed from the curse at last. They began to tremble with newfound enmity and grief, while others counted the villagers' fortune at having been spared, thanks to the sacrifice of the tavern keeper's family. First part end.